go, gremlins! This one's going to be a long one, so buckle up! As of last week, I've been on YouTube for 3 years, and I think it's time for some updates to my channel, as well as a chance to unwind and spend over 30 hours drawing the art in this video. Yeah, this one got a little out of control very quickly, but I just kept having ideas. There are 3 things I want to update in this video. First, the animations I use in some of my physical art videos to transition from section to section. Currently, those transitions look like this. I think I can make something a lot better. Second, I want to redraw my channel banner, which currently looks like this. I threw this together in about 1 hour with no particular plan, and I can definitely do better now. Finally, I want to redraw my profile picture to more closely match the art persona I use everywhere else, as well as my current art style. First up, the transition animations. Since I use these for such a variety of video sections, from painting to sewing to reveals, I want a few variations of the same animation I can use to fit into those different themes. I'm starting with the one element that will be consistent with every animation though. I want to animate a little piece of paper to roll open and reveal whatever text I need. I started this animation with a quick sketch of what I want the final scrap of torn paper to look like, then with a rolled up scroll. My animation is entirely self-taught, and I'm basically just drawing each frame in Photoshop, then exporting those images. While I work though, I can use Photoshop's animate features to see my progress. I started this animation with a sketch of each frame, trying to make sure it would look smooth and at least somewhat obey the laws of physics. And this is what the animation looks like with just those sketches. It's honestly not bad, but will be refined as I add the line art and color. The main problem is the fact that the edge of the paper warps and wobbles, so I'm starting my line art by carefully tracing the edge of the final scrap of paper to make sure each rip and tear line up as much as possible with each frame of the animation. I started on the line art, and I'm constantly tracing my previous frame and then moving it slightly so that the scroll doesn't change shape, just location. I am redrawing the line art, but the shape will stay a lot more consistent if I trace from the previous frame. I'm also trying to make sure that the inner scroll bit is getting smaller each time as the paper unfurls. I don't think the physics totally line up with reality, but I'm hoping the effect is enough to maintain suspended disbelief. And here's the animation with the line art. I didn't record the process of coloring it, I just used the fill bucket tool, so it wasn't particularly interesting. Here is the fully colored paper unfurling, ready for whatever text I need to write. I decided that the best way to make a transition animation that can work for any situation that will likely arise in one of my videos is to have a lot of interchangeable objects that I can layer on top of each other around the paper. Some of these objects will involve slight animations, others will be still, and all will be drawn in a consistent style. I wrote a list of objects to draw and got to work. I ended up with 6 hours of screen recordings of this process, so I'm just going to highlight sections of my work rather than speeding up every moment. Like I said, I went very over top for this video, and this isn't even close to the worst of it. First, I want some objects for when the video section has to do with traditional art. I started with some pencils, one of which will roll toward the piece of paper for a few seconds. There are 4 pencils, each in a color I use a lot in my art. 2 shades of green, black, and red. The shortest green pencil is the one with the animation on it, although the animation is very simple. I just copied that layer and moved it repeatedly for a few frames. Next, I drew a paint palette and some brushes. The palette has green and brown paint, and I slightly animated the shiny highlights of the wet paint. The next theme of a transition card that I often encounter is sewing, so the next set of illustrated objects will include a spool of black thread, a couple of spools of green embroidery thread, a pair of sewing scissors, and a pincushion that took entirely too long to finish. It was also at this point that I changed the color of the desk background to a darker shade of brown. The pincushion has several colored and silver pins, and 2 needles threaded through it. The cushion itself is patterned to look like the cap of a toadstool. I wanted to add a bit of shine animation to the needles, and it took 2 tries and about an hour to get that animation to look right. My first attempt looked too much like the moving edges of a lasso tool selection on Photoshop because the shine just kept coming. In my second attempt though, I only created 3 stripes of shine that move down the length of the needle and don't get replenished, and it looks a lot more like my vision. I also considered animating the shine on the pinheads, but gave up on that idea because 2 animations with different amount of frames on the same object got out of hand. The sewing scissors are inspired by a set of vintage sewing scissors I found on Google Images, although I changed the carved design on the handle to one of mushrooms and ferns. The scissors are brass, and I added another shine animation, although it took a lot less time now that I knew what worked. Now that I had the obvious objects out of the way, I started on some of the more random entries. I want these animations to feel like sections of a cluttered desk, my desk specifically. Next up, therefore, we have a random sketch of a mushroom with parts labeled, as well as a fern clipping and some Polaroids of my artisona and the Sona versions of my friends hanging out. You will see more of these characters in the next section of the video. I also sketched a beetle, but I did not end up animating it. The Polaroids are all quite simple. One involves the bearded gremlin and Garnet the gremlin playing a board game together. Another is a selfie of me and Garnet. The third has me, green, sitting in a tree, and the raven cat gremlin sitting below me sewing. These drawings are all pretty rough and sketchy, but I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. Each Polaroid is its own separate layer that I'm exporting separately so that they can be moved around on the screen when I put these animations together. The next set of objects is bones and teeth. The bird skull was the most interesting element of this collection, but at this point I'm speeding through these. Finally, I have a set of dice, since I do sometimes roll dice to decide things on this channel. I tried freehanding these at first, but got stuck and found a picture online to trace instead. I also got my own physical set of dice out, and rolled each one to decide what number each of the illustrated dice would display, which was fun. These dice are green with gold lettering, which I think is simple but a vibe. Now in theory, each of these elements is completely interchangeable, and I can put any combination of them together to make a transition card as needed. However, there are a few pre-made transition cards I made to show off the concept, as well as to cover most of my commonly needed bases. And now, to use one of those transition cards in action, we come to the next and almost certainly longest section of this video. This is the moment where I truly went off the rails and decided to do the most amount of work possible. You see, I'm redesigning my channel banner and decided that I'd draw my artist Sona's bedroom/art studio. And of course, there's all sorts of details that can be put in a bedroom, like a pinboard, covered in photos of my Sona, Green, and their friends. So before I got started on the actual bedroom illustration, I decided to draw a full version of the pinboard. And of course, I needed to illustrate every photo in the pinboard in high resolution. So anyway, this is why I've been working on this video for a month and needed to somehow compress 30 hours of footage into something manageable. The pinboard itself is 19 hours of recorded work, and that doesn't even mention all the sketches I did in my physical sketchbook during class. Green and the other gremlins just took over my brain for a month and I had no control of them, and it was so worth it. So anyway, this is the pinboard before any photos are in place, and I'll do my best not to talk for ages about every single illustration I put on the pinboard. My first idea was to put Green and the other gremlins in formal clothing, and have them all pose for a group photo. I started brainstorming in class for this drawing after I forgot my drawing tablet stylus and couldn't work on my proper class artwork. The first step, of course, was to ask each of my friends what their Sona would wear as formal wear, and I got a variety of levels of detail in their answers. I'm skipping past the sketch phase since this video is already going to be so long, so we're diving right into my line art. Just know that I struggled with the hands, of course, and had so much fun sketching the clothes. We start with me, Green, in the front due to the fact that Green is canonically about 4.5 feet tall in this fantasy alternate reality. Green is dressed in a waistcoat and plaid pants, leaning on their cane with one hand and holding up a peace sign with the other. Their hair is neatly tied back in a ponytail, and they have on a bird skull necklace and a chain on their hip. Next up, right behind Green and with raven wings spread out behind the whole group, is the Raven Cat gremlin, who gave me the most details about her outfit, which was awesome. She also sent me plenty of reference photos. She's dressed in a full-skirted ball gown with Art Deco-inspired gold filigree, as well as elbow-length matching gloves and a chainmail-inspired necklace. Her hair is up in a fancy bun with curls framing her face. Garnet the gremlin is next, and she gave me a lot more free rein with her outfit, so I based her dress off one that she actually wore to an event we went to together. She's posing with heart hands that took me taking a photo of my own hands to figure out how to draw. She has a braid crowning her head with the rest of her hair loose behind her and flowers decorating it. Finally, I outlined the bearded gremlin, who requested a waistcoat and tie with an interesting tie pin. I made the pin a little silver beetle, which fits his interests. I also gave his waistcoat a subtle scale pattern, which I'm really proud of. With all the outlines done, I got started on the coloring, using the character reference sheets I've made of all these Sonas as my reference. In general, I'm sticking to the color palettes of the base designs unless otherwise specified. Green is of course dressed in greens and blacks, and their waistcoat is a lighter shade of green than their plaid pants. Raven Cat requested a black and gold outfit, including gold accents on her wings, which, after I sent progress photos of this drawing to her, I corrected the design of. I really like the outfit she chose. The black and gold was an excellent choice and so much fun to draw. Garnet is in a deep orange dress, and the flowers in her hair are daisies, a flower I definitely associate with her in real life. The bearded gremlin is in blues and greys, the same as his regular color palette. His waistcoat is navy blue, and the scale pattern just shows up as slightly shimmery against the matte background. His pants are a darker shade of navy, and he has on a grey dress shirt and blue tie with a silver beetle pin just below the knot. He's also wearing his regular sneakers rather than dress shoes. Finally, I drew Raven Cat's wings behind the group, offering a gorgeous backdrop to the whole photograph. I highly recommend drawing your OCs in formal wear. It was so much fun to design and draw these outfits, and honestly, I started the pinboard images off with a bang. The next set of images are also taken at the same event, so I have the first photograph as my reference in the corner. These are photo booth strips from a photo booth that would have been set up at whatever dinner or ball the gremlins went to, and the vibe of these photos is much more silly and relaxed than the posed photograph. I'll also go through this a lot quicker since I've already talked about the outfits, and these drawings also took less time. The first photo strip has all 4 gremlins squeezed into a photo booth as best they can, which is a struggle given they range in height from 4.5 feet to 7 feet, and 3 of the 4 have wings of varying sizes. Still, they make it, although in the first panel Green is tugging Bearded's arm to get his head in frame. I also redrew the first frame after using too thick a brush on it the first time. In the second panel, the gremlins are all pulling silly faces. Green is sticking their tongue out, Garnet is grimacing wide and crossing her eyes, Bearded is shaping his beard into 2 points and raising an eyebrow, and Raven Cat is pretending to bite Green's antler. In the final panel, Green has fallen over from laughing and is being held up by Garnet, who is also laughing. In fact, everyone in the panel is laughing. This photo booth strip was probably done pretty late in the evening when everyone's a little bit loopy. It doesn't take much to bring on the giggles. Also, it doesn't take much for Green to fall over, because Green is me, and I fall over from practically anything. The second photo booth strip is just Green and Garnet. The first photo is just the 2 of them, with Garnet's arm around Green's shoulders, smiling. The second is once again a silly pose, with Green's fingers in their mouth stretching it out wide, and Garnet pretending to swoon with a hand to her face. Finally, there is just a frame of the 2 gremlins laughing. I'm gonna speed through the coloring. I just color picked from my first formal photo, and jumped around from panel to panel, coloring one element at a time. These photos are pretty busy, but that's the point. These are memories Green is keeping on their pinboard after all. Also, photo booths are fun. I finished these pictures off with a filter over all the panels to make it look more like a photo booth printout, and with a brand name logo of the company at the bottom of each strip. I renamed this fictional photo booth company the Camera Obscura Booth, inspired by medieval/Renaissance technology. Next up, we have a simple candid photo of Green and Bearded hanging out together. Bearded is the tallest gremlin at 7 feet tall, and Green is 4.5 feet tall, so I'm really playing with the size difference in this image. Green is fully sitting on Bearded's shoulders, head tipped back in joy, while Bearded keeps him from falling off. Honestly, I just love this image. It's so vibrant and full of life, and I love the dynamic I managed to illustrate here. Green and Bearded are just in their regular character clothes, Bearded in an insect pattern t-shirt and vest, and Green in a plain t-shirt and cargo pants. Green's wings are spread out for balance. The colours are all taken directly from the character reference sheet of these two. Bearded is in all blues and greys except for the bi-flag bracelet on his wrist. Green is all in greens, browns, and blacks, as they always are. The background is just a simple green blur, like this photo is taken outside on a narrow depth of field. I think that's the term. Anyway, I just love how this picture turned out. We have another casual scene up next. This one, a photo of Green's friends all around a campfire on a picnic blanket. Green is the one who took the photo, so is out of frame, and the composition is inspired by a sketch I made of an actual fire I was at with a group of friends that only includes one of the 3 gremlins, since sadly 2 of them live across the world from me now. In this photo, Garnet is at the right, sitting with knees up to her chest and one hand propping her up while the other rests across those knees. A mug patterned with ladybugs sits next to her, since the gremlins are all sharing hot drinks around this campfire. Garnet is dressed in a hoodie and jeans and is barefoot, with hair in braids since she's camping and doesn't want to worry about brushing it. Ravencat is to the left, lounging on the picnic blanket propped up on one arm with a mug in her other hand. She's dressed in a fur-trimmed coat based on one this friend owns in real life and sent me reference photos of, and her raven wings are folded behind her. Finally, Bearded is sitting cross-legged in the middle of the frame, behind the other 2. He also has a mug of hot drink and is dressed in a whale shark t-shirt and his regular jeans and sneakers. I'm not shading any of the pinboard images since these all took 19-ish hours already, but I did add some light effects to this particular image using the glowing fire and a vignette at the edges for the nighttime shadow. Before that though, I just used regular colours rather than darkening or warming them for the sake of this drawing. Garnet's hoodie is green and her jeans dark. Ravencat is dressed in her signature mulberry, and I added orange highlights to her glasses to reflect the flames in front of her. Bearded is once again in blues and greys. I made a very simple picnic blanket pattern by making a rectangle, adding low opacity stripes going both ways to make a gingham pattern, then using the perspective warp to make the whole thing look like it's on the ground in this image. I added a foil mat around the fireball so that the blanket doesn't get scorched or catch fire. Finally, I added the aforementioned light and shadow effects, and suddenly it looks like a dark evening with a warm orange fire lighting the faces of the gremlins. Next up, we have a set of Polaroids, all a series of photos taken one after the other of one event. This idea comes to you courtesy of the Ravencat gremlin, and is inspired by the fact that my knees sometimes don't work and I have to be half carried, or fully lifted and placed somewhere. What if that same situation happened, but the person carrying Green had giant raven wings? I had so much fun with these drawings. In the first Polaroid, probably taken by Garnet as she and Green hang out on the grass, Green is sitting leaning slightly on their cane. It is vaguely implied that Green can't stand at the moment and either sat down to prevent falling or did fall and just rearranged themselves into a sitting position. Behind them looms Ravencat Gremlin, who Green has not yet noticed. In the second Polaroid, Green has suddenly been scooped. They're dropping their cane in surprise as Ravencat lifts them by the armpits, basically. This drawing inspired the small song, If Your Green is Misbehave, You Do a Scoop, based on a similar audio on TikTok and Instagram of cat owners scooping up their misbehaving cats. Also, the Ravencat Gremlin asked me to sing it for you, so you're welcome for that. If the audio is still relevant when I post this, and if I remember, I might use it over these images for an Instagram reel. In the third Polaroid, Ravencat has taken flight and Green is clinging to her arm and laughing, legs dangling. I believe by the time I finished with these Polaroids, I labeled this one as I Can Show You the World. The final frame has Ravencat and Green soaring far above the camera fairy, who's doing her best to follow the action. When this frame got colored, I added motion blur to the pair, since Ravencat is now zooming. I think part of the reason I found this project so fun was that I was basically drawing versions of me and my friends the whole time, and sending those drawings in progress to those friends. The Ravencat gremlin got the worst of it, since she lives in my time zone and responds pretty regularly no matter what time of day I was drawing. Not only did I get the validation of someone else appreciating my art, I also got great ideas about what to draw, these images included. It was awesome. Anyway, the colors of these Polaroids are pretty simple. I added a filter over everything to make the blacks bluish and the edges darker, added a few notes to the white edges of the pictures, and added motion blur to the final frame for comedic effect. Before we continue, here's a quick update on how the whole pinboard is going, as I add these photos to their places. Anyway, on to the next set of Polaroids. These are not connected, instead single photos from a variety of situations. First, we have Green very proudly holding up a raccoon crow griffin that they caught by the trash bins. This griffin is one of the griffin designs I created for a poster a couple months ago, and this poster should still be available as a digital file on my Etsy if you want it. It has several griffin variations from a mouse wren to a classic lion eagle. Green couldn't catch a lion eagle, but they could catch a corvid griffin. Bearded took the photo, just as proud of Green as Green is of themselves. Garnet would have been behind the cameraman looking concerned. This photo was taken at night, which feels like an appropriate time to have gone out to the trash cans and found a critter. It's lit with a beam of yellow light from an open doorway. I'm not sure whose home this event would have taken place in, all the gremlins are always at each other's places. The next Polaroid is another photo taken around the time of the formal event, in this case while getting ready together. Garnet is almost ready, with her makeup bag on the counter beside her, posing for the picture. Green doesn't yet have their hair back or their waistcoat on, and is doing their best to give Garnet bunny ears. Of course, Green can't quite reach, and it hasn't even occurred to them that they have wings and could just fly high enough to get the desired effect. The colours in this image are once again taken from the main formal event photograph with a Polaroid filter applied over top. Next, we have a Polaroid of Green and Ravencat hanging out. Green quite literally, as they're hanging upside down from a tree branch. Ravencat has an arm out just in case, because even though Green can fly, it is rather hard to activate your wings while falling upside down and unexpectedly. This is a pretty random scene to draw, but I had fun with it anyway, and sometimes you just need photos of random shenanigans that happen when hanging out. The final Polaroid is the most detailed of the set, and it includes all 4 gremlins, with Green taking the photo as a group selfie, despite having the shortest arms. It's movie night, and everyone is squashed together on someone's couch in PJs. Bearded is right next to Green, holding a full bowl of popcorn that won't stay full for long. Garnet is next, and Ravencat behind her, cross-legged on the couch. I really like the energy of this photo. Even if some of the gremlins have never met in real life, I like imagining that they would all be friends if eventually everyone ends up in the same place. We're back to full-scale illustrations. This one is of Green and Garnet hanging out at a sleepover. Garnet is holding the camera in selfie mode and has her free arm around Green's shoulder. They're both in pajamas and wearing green face masks, sitting on a bed together. Garnet's wings are spread, Green's folded. Green is dressed in mushroom PJs, Garnet has a made-up university t-shirt and shorts. The t-shirt reads University of Camelot because it's the random fantasy name I thought of at the time. Next up we have a photograph of Ravencat and Green at the beach. Ravencat is the focus of this image, standing in the surf facing down the ocean with wings spread in the breeze. Green is visible in the background, looking very creature-like in the sand as they hunt for shells and cool rocks. Ravencat's curls are tied back in a ponytail, blowing in the wind, and she's in a swimsuit with a sheer wrap in her signature color around her waist. She's holding a cane for stability in the water. Green is in a swim t-shirt and shorts, crouched down in the sand holding a rock with their wings spread out for balance. I had a lot of fun rendering the waves, using watercolor brushes and a mix of opaque and transparent to avoid having to figure out how to draw feet. I'm spending less time talking about each image as I go, mostly because I'm slowly watching the page count of my script grow while I'm only halfway through the video. Oh dear. This might be the longest video ever, and I'm not sure anyone will even want to watch it. Honestly though, the amount of joy I got from making this, I don't care if it technically flops. This project fueled my dopamine levels for a month, and that's enough for me. Next up, we have another photo booth strip, this one taken at the same beach trip, and once again featuring Ravencat and Green. In the first panel, the two are just posing. Green is holding up a peace sign, and Ravencat is resting an elbow on Green's head between their antlers. Green is dressed in a ribcage pattern tank top, and Ravencat in a floral sundress. In the second panel, Green has been lifted to be taller for the camera and is grinning up at Ravencat, who is still considerably taller. I ended up turning Green's facial expression into a separate image I can use as a reaction image at Ravencat's suggestion. In the final frame, Green has gotten up close to the camera and is doing jazz hands, while Ravencat stands with arms crossed and an eyebrow raised. I made life easier for myself by drawing the pattern on Ravencat's sundress only once, then just copy-pasting it over the other versions of the dress and erasing the parts that overlapped the edges. Green's colours in this image fit pretty closely to their regular design. They are wearing a different shirt, but it's still mostly black, just with a white ribcage graphic. Ravencat, though, is in cream, yellow, red, blue, and green. And of course, all the colours will be altered by a filter to make this look more like a photo booth quality photo. The final touch is the photo booth logo, a different company this time. These photos were brought to you by Ocean Views. And with that, I've compressed 19 hours of work into I'm not sure how many minutes, and the pinboard is complete. I'll just leave this on the screen for a while so all my hard work can be properly admired. I'll also be posting this and each photo individually on Instagram at some point soon. Now we come to the reason I created the pinboard in the first place. Time to design Green's bedroom for purposes of being a YouTube channel banner. The first step was figuring out the dimensions of a file for a YouTube banner, and I found a diagram on Google Images to serve as my guide. Most people would just see a strip of this artwork in the middle, but if you watch YouTube on your TV, you should be able to see the whole thing. This artwork will also be posted on my Instagram at some point in the next week or so. When first coming up with this concept, I wrote a list of all the elements I wanted to appear in the room, including regular bedroom furniture, signs of projects I've actually done on the channel, and of course, the pinboard. While I finish up the sketch and work on the line art, let's do a quick Q&A. First question, how long have you been doing art for? I've been drawing in some form or another since I was old enough to hold a pencil. I grew up with both my parents being artists in some form, and my drawing was very encouraged. I started doing digital art using Microsoft Paint when I was probably around 4 years old before I knew how to read, and Adobe Illustrator around 8. And I started learning to draw in Photoshop at 14. I've been doing the kind of art I do now for about 6 or 7 years. Do you ever take pants apart to make it easier to get patches on? Have you used patches to actually mend things? For the first part of this question, no, although it would make my life easier if I did take my pants apart to sew patches on, and then re-sewed the edge seams. The closest I've come to taking my pants apart to sew patches onto them was when I was adding patches to my pair of zip-off cargo pants, and I was able to disassemble them via the zips. As for the second part of this question, I have actually used patches to repair holes in a skirt that I ripped, but so far I haven't had to repair any holes in my pants. The only holes present are the rips I added on purpose to my jeans. However, if I did rip any of my clothing, I would mend it, probably with patches. How long have you been sewing? My mum taught me to sew pretty young. I don't remember how old I was, but I would have been over 10 years ago at this point. I've gone through phases of sewing a lot and not sewing at all, and recently I've been sewing a lot, especially having gotten into both clothing customization and historical costuming. Any tips for sewing/embroidery? For sewing, I think it's been long enough that it's hard for me to remember what things were actually useful to know starting out. My main advice, I guess, is when hand sewing, doubling up your thread and sewing your first stitch through the loop is much easier and neater than trying to tie a knot at the start of your thread. Also, using a French knot to finish a thread is easier than trying to tie a knot with your fingers. I don't know how to explain how to do a French knot, but it should be easy to look up. As for embroidery, I've gotten more into learning embroidery recently, and I think looking up resources on how to do a variety of stitches is very helpful. I went from knowing 3 or 4 stitches from Pinterest posts to having a whole variety of options available to me for different projects. Also, unless the thing you're embroidering needs to look very chunky, splitting your thread saves a lot of money. Generally, embroidery floss comes in a 6-strand spool, and I tend to embroider with 3 or 4 strands, making the floss go twice as far. I'd love to know your music taste. I have a hard time describing my music taste because I'm not very good at identifying genres of music. Generally, I like alternative music. I listen to a lot of metal and pop punk and other alternative music that I'm not sure the classification of. About a year ago, I went through every music artist I followed and sorted them all by how much I enjoyed their music. So I can say that my favorite alternative bands include Fall Out Boy, MCR, Ghost, Neoni, RTO, Youngblood, Powerwolf, and Blackbriar. I also listen to music I describe as forest music, which includes artists like Hosier, Ye Lokra, and Rabbitology. Finally, I also like musicals, especially history musicals like Hamilton, Les Mis, and Six the Musical. Have you talked about what got you into Gremlin/Goblin Core before? I have not, actually. I got into Goblin Claw through aesthetic TikTok compilations on YouTube, which I started watching during the 2020 lockdown. I wasn't allowed any social media besides YouTube, so I watched a lot of TikTok compilations of various themes. I started watching cottagecore content, but that evolved into Goblin Core, which was more up my alley as someone with an interest in mushrooms and bones and frogs. I started researching the aesthetic more from there, and found the aesthetic wiki, which I use a lot these days as my main source for all my aesthetic videos. That wiki led me to other overlapping aesthetics like mosscore and forest punk, and by now I think I've found a personal style that is very influenced by Goblin Core and similar aesthetics, but isn't rigidly bound to one look. If I'm stuck on ideas for outfits or clothing customizations though, I will still look up Goblin Core style on Pinterest for ideas. Finally, the last question I received. What are you most proud of right now? This one's a big question, and to be honest, I'm not sure. I'm really proud of the art I do, especially the clothing I've customized recently, as I can really see my growth since I started. Right now, I'm really proud of the patch shorts I've made recently. I've been wearing them all the time. On a more serious note, I'm really proud of myself at the moment. The last year has had a lot of struggles, which I haven't really talked about a lot on here, including an evolving disability I'm still seeking answers on, and the massive life change of moving out of home and living on my own for the first time. I'm really proud of myself for continuing to make it through despite the challenges, for having found an amazing community of friends, and for still finding time to make art and create outside my classes. Thank you for these questions. I hope I was able to answer them all well. We return to the lineup with Green, who is walking through the middle of their room holding a t-shirt that they just painted. Behind them is the Griffin poster I designed and the pinboard. Originally the plan was for the pinboard illustration to stay as is, but because of how much I had to shrink it to fit it in place, the details all look fuzzy and messy, so instead I went over every bit of it with line art, simplifying it down so that it still looks cluttered and full, but it doesn't look fuzzy. So even after all that work I put into the pinboard, I still had to draw it all a second time for this image. Still worth it. The final step of the line art was the walls and ceiling, and the vines are hung all around the room for extra detail. And now we get started on the colouring process, going section by section, starting with Green's bed, which is half bed, half nest. Green's bed is round, with a wooden headboard that still looks like the tree it was carved from, and a messy collection of blankets and pillows to snuggle into. They have leaf and mushroom-shaped pillows, and a patchwork blanket that I'm really proud of, and honestly, this is like my dream bed. I coloured the quilt by designating which squares would match with bold neon colours, then recolouring each square to have a pattern in greens and browns. Some patterns I drew, some are just fancy brushes I have, and one set of patches is left plain. Underneath all that patchwork, the main duvet is green, and if I was putting more detail into this work, it would be a fuzzy polar fleece texture mimicking moss. The rug next to the bed is also mossy textured, and great for lying down on when Green's had a tiring day and needs floor time. On the bedside table, Green has a mushroom-shaped lamp, currently off, a tankard-shaped mug of water, and a book with a mushroom on the cover. Realistically, Green would also have a magically powered phone and charger, but those are part of the nightstand hidden behind the bed. Next up, we have Green's beanbag, where the Grizzlope sits. The Grizzlope is the name of the teddy bear plushie I forest punkified on the channel earlier this year. I've linked that video in the cards. What was once a plain brown teddy bear is now covered in embroidered and knitted patches of moss, has a ribcage pattern on his chest, and has little antlers that match Green's. During the day, he has pride of place on their beanbag, and at night, Green holds him tight to their chest. I coloured in Green themselves next, using the colour palette sheet I finally created for all the gremlins, so I can stop putting the actual character reference sheets in every drawing just for the purposes of eyedroppering colours. Green is dressed in their regular outfit, but instead of their boots, they're wearing just socks, and these socks are patterned with mushrooms. Green's desk is my next target. The desk has the same style of mushroom-shaped lamp illuminating it, as well as a few mugs of pens and pencils, and signs that Green was filming their transition videos here, inspired by the animations from earlier in this video. Green sits on a toadstool-style chair, which I love the idea of in theory, but know would kill my back in practice. Oh well, Green can have what I can't. The desk itself also has mushroom details. The drawer knobs are all shelf fungi, which is something I really want to do with a piece of furniture sometime in the future. On the wall behind the desk are hung two images. One is the sticker sheet I designed, full of Halloween-themed frogs. I drew these frogs a few videos ago, and these stickers are still available on my Etsy. Halloween may be over, but I think spooky frogs can be admired all year round. The other is a photograph of Green and the other gremlins doing the classic fall ghost photoshoot trend, which I see all over Instagram at this time of year. I made my own version of that trend, drawing it rather than taking actual photos, and I'm creating a simplified version of that artwork for this illustration. The next element of Green's room are their works in progress. In this case, Green is painting t-shirts. They're currently taking the freshly painted ribcage t-shirt away from their drop cloth to go dry, but still on the drop cloth is a mushroom pattern t-shirt surrounded by the paints used to make it. I even made the color of the paint water match a sample of all those paint colors blended together to add to the realism. As I script this though, I do realize that I forgot to draw any mixing palettes, which would have been used as the stems of the mushrooms are all mixed from several paints. Oh well. Green's bookshelf isn't actually as cluttered as I think it should be, but drawing clutter takes a lot out of me, so this is my best attempt. I'm coloring shelf by shelf, starting at the top, which is a shelf for fabric. Some of these fabrics match the patterns on Green's patchwork quilt, since in the lore they sewed it themselves. I'm quite proud of that detail. The next shelf down has a Griffin plushie, which just seems like something Green would have alongside their poster and Griffin t-shirt. The rest of the shelf is more sewing supplies, a whole basket of thread, and several skeins of wool that would be used to make fake moss. Next, we have random collections of trinkets and things, starting with a deck of cards. This deck of cards is actually one I designed myself, with unique suits and full illustrations for each face card. And this deck of cards is available for purchase through the Game Crafter. I've linked it in the description. You can also watch the video where I made these cards here. The rest of the shelf is full of jars of random trinkets and a little pouch that probably contains dice. There are also the first set of Green's books. The temptation is there to make all the books different shades of green and brown, but instead I made each cluster of books a different set of pride flag colours, so it looks a bit more colourful but still thematic. The first set of books are the non-binary flag colours. Right below, on the next shelf down, are the bi-flag colours and books. Beside it is the ink cap mushroom hat I made out of cardboard and paper mache a few months ago. Again, I've linked that video. And beside it is another set of books, this time not pride flag coloured, but just green, yellow and brown. Finally, we come to a full rainbow of books and a box labelled craft supplies because I was getting tired of drawing clutter detail, so I just hid the clutter in a simple box. The next item of furniture is Green's sewing table. The sewing machine on the table is drawn from memory, so if it isn't quite accurate, that's because this is an urban fantasy alternate reality and they're designed a little differently. Under the table is a box of more fabric, and again, some of these pieces match patches on Green's quilt. Behind the sewing table is Green's dress form, dressed in the mushroom skirt I made just a few weeks ago. I really like that I've been able to put all these little projects I've done on the channel all throughout Green's room. This section of room also has a round hobbit window looking out over some rolling hills that pass a little garden. I recolored the view twice after the first time it didn't look quite coherent. And now I return to the Griffin poster and pinboard. I'm color matching all my colors from the original higher res versions of these artworks, which was easy with the Griffins and took a while with the pinboard. Oh well, it's a chance for you to see all the work I put into these photos again, as I redraw them but quicker and simpler. Finally, I had to color the room itself, starting with the vines. In canon, I think Green tried to hang the vines themselves by flying up to the ceiling with string or tape, but while Green can fly, they can't really hover. After a frustrating afternoon, they called in help, and the bearded gremlin, who can just touch the ceiling if he wants to, hung the vines up with ease in return for snacks. As well as the vines, the ceiling also has wooden beams for a little extra detail. The walls are simple beige so that all the other colours of the room stand out against them, and the floor is wooden. At this point I did start moving around some of the elements of the artwork and having to fix the unfinished edges that were originally hidden behind them. Most notably, after I checked how this banner would look on most devices, I realised that Green was cropped weirdly. I moved them up a little and back so that they'll be entirely in frame. And here's the final channel banner. And here's what it looks like in place on my laptop screen. It will be cropped slightly differently depending on your screen resolution, but I'm really happy with how it came out. It feels a lot more connected to the channel lore that I'm creating than my previous banner did. And as I keep mentioning, I had so much damn fun with this. The final part of this video, if anyone is still watching, again, sorry about how long this has ended up being, is redrawing my profile picture. This very low-res image is my original profile picture. I lost the original high-res file, so all I have is the low-res version and screenshots. This picture is the first thing I ever posted to my YouTube. You can still watch it if you want, but it's just an illustration set to some free music that came with my Photos video editor on my laptop before I started using a proper editing program. This is also where my artisona, Green, was first born, although they look a little different here. I hadn't yet come out as non-binary and still had long hair when I drew this. As I work, I keep zooming out and back in to make sure the design will look good at the small scale of the profile picture. I'm also flipping the canvas to make sure my anatomy isn't too wonky, something I did not do for the first version of this artwork. The new profile picture will more closely match what Green looks like now. I also gave them a more dynamic pose rather than just a 3/4 look straight at the camera. Green is laughing, head tilted slightly and body turned a little away from the viewer. While Green's hair is very different, a lot of elements of this character design are still the same from my first illustration. Green has a lot of the same jewelry, the same color palette, and the same crown of leaves, flowers, and ferns. Those elements have just been refined. In my original profile picture, the crown of foliage is busy and messy with probably too many details. Since then, I've refined Green's crown down to 4 colors and 3 plants. There are several white and yellow daisies, several green leaves, and several light green ferns, and it looks much more neat and unified. I also removed Green's layered necklaces, just giving them a choker for the ease of drawing this design over and over again. The art style of this illustration has also changed, not just because it's been 3 years and my art has improved, but because for some reason I changed my way of drawing people just for the last profile picture. I guess trying to make it more cartoony, hence Green having huge eyes for no good reason. This new version is a lot more in line with how I draw people regularly. I've had a lot of practice drawing Green in the last month, between all the pinboard photos and the fact that Green kinda possessed me for a while, and I ended up with several sketchbook pages just full of them in different poses. It might be a little strange since Green is basically a fantasy version of me, and I guess that means I've been drawing dozens of self-portraits? I don't know. Still, it means I've got a pretty good grasp on their character design by now. I finished up the profile picture with some shading and a little gradient to the background. I then cropped it so that only my new illustration is in frame, so I can upload this to YouTube. I will be changing my profile picture on both YouTube and on Instagram. And that's this monster of a video done. A lot of hours went into this, and honestly the whole thing feels like a passion project. It fueled my dopamine levels for a month, and now it's done. Again, check out my Instagram where I'll be posting all this art, as well as random other reels relating to things I make. Check out my Etsy for stickers, a poster, and hand-painted clothing, and the Game Crafters for a custom deck of cards. Thank you so much for supporting me in the last 3 years, and here's to many more. Until next time, bye!